Thousands of protesters have taken to the streets in Sudan's capital a day after 9 people were killed in demonstrations against the country's ruling generals. The death toll in the protest has risen to 9. Doctors say many of the victims were shot as security forces confronted large crowds in multiple cities. Police used tear gas, water cannon and live ammunition as they tried to block the swelling crowds from marching towards the presidential palace in Khartoum. The U.S. and other countries have condemned the violence in the East African nation. Well, let's cross live now to Kenya and speak to Arise East African correspondent Mark Bichachi. Mark, great to have you on the news tonight here in Nigeria. This protest has been on for a long time. Just bring us up to speed as to what is motivating these protesters to stay on as the generals have refused to leave power.
Well, you are quite right. These demonstrations have gone on for a while. 8 people have been reported dead. And the reason is simply because the generals remain in power. They want to remain controlling both political and economical power and still remain generals in the army. So this is the issue that the protesters are having. And they're having these resurgent demonstrations simply because it's a year since the army took over in a bloodless coup and removed the civilian government that was there. So this is the issue that the civilians are complaining about. They want a return to democratic rule as soon as possible.
Mark, what exactly has happened to the power sharing agreement between protesters and the TMC? That agreement was, entered into in August of 2019.
Well, what happened to it is that the head of the army, General Buhani, decided that it is not working out. He came out with an excuse saying that it is not functioning, that there is disputes between the army and the ruling council. And once he decided that, what he did is the army took over sometime last year. Now, of course, immediately they took over. They took over the premiership, arrested the premier, had him in house arrest for a while, and they tried to come up with a government after that. But that was rejected. The main opposition parties have also rejected to negotiate with the army, and efforts by the EU and other international organizations to broker peace between these factions has not worked. And the people are simply demanding that the army should get out of office and should also surrender their companies. So this is where the real issue is, that the people do not want anything to do with the army.
Political parties, Mark. I mean, Sudanese are known to topple their government through street protests such as this. We've seen it before. But are there any talks of changing strategy? And again, the political parties, what are they saying?
Well, number one, I do not think there's going to be a change of strategy in terms of the civilian unrest, because civilians have fought for their independence before successfully. They have fought for their civil rights successfully, so that is not going to stop. Are we going to see an escalation in terms of them picking up arms? I doubt it. There is no indication of that as at now. But in terms of the political parties, many of the main political parties have stood firm that the General Buhani has to go back and give back leadership to civilian rule and pave way to elections and democracy if possible. So the political parties are definitely on the side of the people. The majority of them, the military remains in control by force of the bullet, really, since they've already killed 8 people. So that's the standoff, where the army is on one side and the political parties and the demonstrators are demanding for a return to civilian rule.
But we do gather that military leaders are said to be, okay with negotiations with political parties and willing to hold that election come end of 2023. What's going to happen to all of that with this latest developments now?
Well, if you follow it up carefully, the army has given signals that they are willing to talk, but the civilian and political parties are insisting that the army should step down before any democratic activity can happen. And the reason for that is simple. The people feel that the army will manipulate the vote if it's in control, and they'll not be able to get the voice of the people heard. So there's a lot of distrust in the army. Let us remember, this is the same army that attacked and got the better hand of the ruling council and removed other council members and just made sure they were ruling by themselves. So again, the people do not trust the army, and that's the issue. So the generals have said they're willing to talk, but I do not think that the people are willing to talk to them.
And you're right, a lot of people have lost their lives, Mark, but you've been watching this protest for a long time now. Would you say it has deteriorated?
Well, I think now, this time around we've had less killings and less crisis, probably because we are seeing a less volatile crowd and a less volatile army, because the army also has suffered a lot of economic distress based on the fact that the United States had sanctions. A lot of the aid they were supposed to receive never came. So the truth is that they are suffering, and therefore the army also does not want to see an escalation. So there is a bit of holding back on the side of the army, and also these demonstrations do not look as big as they were last year.
Mark Bichachi, Rise correspondent in East Africa, thank you so much for joining us. We'll keep an eye, of course, on things as they develop in Sudan.